I think we've got another graph to put on the screen now that will give us some context for this next question. So Julie, as you were finishing off your previous answer, you talked about how in New Zealand, comparatively, we have a very high minimum wage, and that's in part a political decision based on the current government's policy around minimum wage. And we can see from this next graph that things tend to change quite a lot in minimum wage policy depending on who is in government. So Peter, do you want to talk us briefly through what we're looking at on this slide here?
Yes, our candy stripe document. What we've got there is the highest minimum wage paid throughout that period. So it's the male and then the adult. And the stripes there are political periods. And you can see that through the long period of national governments and a bit of Labor in the up to 1970, the minimum wage was drifting down. It got boosted significantly by the Kirk government, then declined through the Muldoon years, boosted again by the Lonnie Palmer government, and then declined through the Bolger years, then increased again, and on you go. So we can see clearly that political dimension, that the rate does tend to go up a bit more in Labor administrations than in national. But the exceptions that prove the rule, the Bolger government abolished the youth minimum wage and just made it a minimum wage for everyone. That was a significant increase for younger workers. And then the Key government, as you can see there, particularly at the end of its period, it was increasing the real minimum wage quite significantly. But you can see that political dimension and the way the Minimum Wage Act, the legislation works. The minister's got very wide discretion. All they have to do is review it once a year, and then they can do what they like. And one of the things we would suggest in the paper that we might like to think about putting in some more, hopefully bipartisan guidance around what things the minister should think about when setting the minimum wage, rather than leave it just to their discretion.
So it's a really interesting graph, this one, and you're right, it's clearly a trend is apparent. And I suppose the question I have for you, Julie, is why does it matter? If we can see, broadly speaking, and as you say, Peter, there's exceptions from time to time, but broadly speaking, Labor government or Labor-led governments tend to increase the minimum wage more than national-led governments do. Why is that a problem? Why is this one of the fears that the paper is framed around? And what's the detrimental or problematic impact of this trend?
I guess when you look at a lot of our other kind of economic frameworks that we have around things like tax policy or price stability, there's general agreement. So when a change of government occurs, businesses, consumers don't need to be thinking, oh, okay, we're going into a period where this is going to go up a lot, or we're going to go into a period where this is going to go down a lot. There's a consistency and a certainty that makes decision making and investment easier, and just having it be a little bit less volatile would be helpful for that.
And it's also how workers and potential workers think about the minimum wage, because one of the important decisions that people have got to make is, do they stay at school, do they get more education, or do they go into the workforce? And some of the early work in New Zealand was showing that lifting the youth minimum wage actually encouraged people to leave school, and unfortunately some of them went to unemployment. So having potential workers having some certainty about the track of wages going forward means that they can make their very important decisions about participating in education based on a more certain view of what wages are going to do going forward.